ahead and start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting of City of Leesburg Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is July 22nd, 2021. It's 4:30. Please stand for the invocation and the pledge of flag. Commissioner Sanders, if you would.
Let us go to God in prayer. Oh, heavenly and gracious Father, which all blessings flow. We come before you right now, Father God, just as humble as we know how, just to say thank you, O Lord. Oh, Lord, we want to thank you for another day's journey. And Father God, right now we ask that you bless our meeting this evening, O Lord. We ask that you bless it and find approval in your eyes. These things we pray in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Dan, you want to go ahead and do the, whatever it's called?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 27, 2021 City of Leesburg Planning Commission meeting. My name is Dan Miller, Planning and Zoning Manager with the City of Leesburg. Staff present today includes Sabrina Mitchell, Administrative Assistant, Diane Pacewitz, Carrie Lee Murray, Planners, and Candy Harper, Senior Planner. Today's meeting agenda is available on the table by the exit door. If you would like to speak on a case, we would ask that you please sign the speaker's registry and turn it in to Sabrina, who sits here to my left. Under the rules of participation, the meeting will be conducted under the following process. The chairman will announce the case and staff will read a list of exhibits into the record, including maps, photos, and text, and then present that on the screens. Staff will then read a recommendation into the record. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak about the request. Then the chairman will allow time for public comment. The applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal. The chairman closes the case to the public, and the commission will discuss the case. At that point, a vote will be taken, and the commission will move on to the next case. The Planning Commission consists of citizens appointed by the City Commission. They are charged with two major responsibilities. One is to make decisions on cases such as variances and conditional uses. The other is to make recommendations for issues to be heard by the City Commission. Today, the Planning Commission will be making recommendations only, which will then be forwarded to the City Commission for final decisions. So all four cases on today's agenda will be heard by the City Commission and decided there. There are some tentative dates for the City Commission hearings that are listed in bold on the agenda for each item. They are subject to be changed to earlier or later dates, so please do check with the Planning and Zoning Office or the City Clerk's Office regarding final hearing dates. Finally, on behalf of the planning staff and the Leesburg Planning Commission, we'd like to thank you for participating in today's public hearing process. Mr. Chairman, we are ready for you to announce the first case.
Thank you very much. First of all, let's everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes for the 24th of June. Are there any corrections, deletions, additions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Motion to approve, the June 24th minutes.
Okay, got a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. Before we get started, and obviously there's a lot of people here, and it's going to be an interesting meeting. If you would, I want to remind you to remember we are volunteers and take it easy on us. Also, what we're going to do is we're going to limit the speaking to 3 minutes each, so we won't be here for a week. And we'll try to give everybody an opportunity. If you haven't signed up yet, you need to sign up to be able to speak, because once we call the case, that's it. So if you've all done that, I appreciate it. Also, please remember, if somebody's already talked about something or discussed something, if you repeat yourselves, I'm gonna probably slow you down or stop you, just, so we can keep moving. So, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak, so thank you. All right, old business, public hearing, case number PUD 21-141, Salvation Army, PUD amendment, plan unit development, rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This first case is for a revision of an existing PUD zoning for the Salvation Army on South Street under case number PUD 21-141. Under the background, the property is generally located on the south side of South Street and west of Caballo Road. The request is to consider an amendment to the existing PUD zoning to allow the addition of senior housing on a property of approximately 13 plus or minus acres. This is the site of the existing Salvation Army Worship Social Services Center. The property is currently zoned PUD. The request is a minimal request, just adding some senior housing. Candy Harper, senior planner, will present the maps and photo exhibits, including the aerial zoning, future land use, surroundings land use, wetlands, flood zone maps, and CRE maps.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Commissioners, on the screen before you is an aerial showing where the property is located in the city of Leesburg. It is south of South Street, and it lies west of Cabello Road. It's all the properties in the hatches. And the zoning is planned unit development and also small planned unit development. So this amendment is taking it all into one planned unit development. And Lake County zoning around it is agriculture, R6, which is residential. And then to the north is a little bit of industrial. And the future land use shows the property all is C3 highway commercial, a little bit of commercial across the street, and then surrounded by housing. And Lake County future land use shows mostly housing around it and commercial to the north of South Street. And the surrounding land uses support what you see in the zoning and also the future land use. There are stores across the street as well as pastures, many warehouses, offices, and single-family structures. Vacant residential to the west and single-family to the south and east. And their wetlands are actually located inside their DRA, designed as part of the site. And the flood zones pretty much track the wetlands. I don't know that they'll have much issue on the property they wish to develop. And it is in Commission District 3. We posted the site. We always take a picture where we posted it, so we shot into the property. And then the picture on the bottom is looking east along South Street, so it's looking toward Leesburg. The picture on the top is looking across from the property, which is north of the property, and the picture on the bottom is looking west along South Street, so moving away from the city of Leesburg. And then we went over to the property that I believe they're actually going to develop and posted there as well, and took the same series of photographs. The bottom picture is looking east along South Street. The picture on the top is looking north from the posting, so that's north of South Street. And the picture on the bottom is looking west along South Street. And then we moved back into the little piece of property and posted there as well, and then took the same series of photos. So the picture on the bottom is looking north along Caballo. Picture on the top is looking south along Caballo. And then the picture on the bottom is looking across Caballo into the subject property, or into the property next door. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Candy. But that will move to the departmental review summary. There were no substantive comments from any of the departments. We did receive 3 public responses in the negative on this one. That was regarding the overall use, speed of travel on South Street, and some traffic concerns. I'd like to go ahead and read the recommendations into the record for this case, and then we'll go over the PUD document. This is for case number PUD 21-141, Salvation Army PUD Amendment. Planning and Zoning Division recommends approval of the request for the following reasons. 1, the proposed zoning designation of PUD is compatible with the surrounding adjacent properties having zoning designations of Lake County Agricultural. planned industrial, planned commercial, mixed residential, urban residential, and City of Leesburg, medium-density residential, industrial, and small plan unit development. 2, the future land use designation of general commercial is compatible with the surrounding adjacent properties having future land use designations of Lake County Regional Commercial, Urban Low Density, and City of Leesburg Industrial, General Commercial, and High Density Residential. 3, the proposed request is consistent with the city's growth management plan, future land use element goal 1, objective 1.6, and the action requested is vote to approve the recommendation to amend the current PUD zoning to include additional land and the uses of church, house of worship, and social services to include senior housing and youth center campus uses. So if you look at the PUD on the following page, this is 12.94 plus or minus acres for the Salvation Army. The only changes we're adding the senior housing, requesting a maximum of 36 units. That's about the only change. There are architectural standards, parking standards, protections for wetlands drainage, transportation requirements for traffic analysis, landscaping and buffer requirements, and that's about it. It is a standard PUD, and the change is basically to add the property that sits on the east to this PUD and eventually utilize that for housing. Mr. Mike Rankin from LPG Land Planning Group of Mount Dora is here, and Mr. Chairman, staff is recommending approval of this request.
Okay, thank you. Before we start bringing people up, could we swear in everybody that's going to speak? If you plan on speaking tonight, please stand and raise your right hand.
Do you swear affirm the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
Thank you all. Is there any questions of staff before we go on to the applicant? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Mike Rankin with LPG Urban Land Planning Group. We bring Salvation Army's PUD in front of you tonight. We really see this more of a housekeeping chore more than anything else. As Mr. Miller did point out, we did make some changes to the land use, the site access, the design requirements, development standards, and so on. And I had mentioned to Dan the other day that I would be here instead of Greg, and he quickly realized the meeting would be reduced greatly in time, so I intend to honor that. I would answer any questions if you would have any.
Any questions of the applicant?
I have a question.
Sure.
How many apartments do you plan on putting in this area?
The question is how many apartments?
Yeah.
The PUD calls out a maximum of 36 units.
36 units.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think the question was, how many did you intend to put in? 36?
Yes.
And then how many individuals per unit? Is that a single unit one, or is it,
I don't believe the size of the individual or individuals in the dwelling was determined.
okay, so 36 units, how many individuals per dwelling?
Right.
I'm going to assume, since it's senior, 1 or 2.
Okay. Now, one of the comments was
Yep.
concern of the traffic.
Yep.
And that's why I'm asking. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I wanted to point out that Candy did mention that this was a lovely project, by the way.
Is there anybody here to speak on this case? Okay. Well, if there's nobody or no questions, we'll close to the audience, the public, and open for discussion and a motion.
I'd like to motion to approve PUD 21-141, Salvation Army PUD amendment as presented.
I second.
Been first and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of Salvation Army and LPG, we thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All right, new business number one, public hearing case number CPTA 21-224, property rights element, comprehensive plan text amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for an amendment to the City of Leesburg Comprehensive Plan text under case number CPTA 21-224, entitled Property Rights Element Comprehensive Plan Text Amendment. Under the background, the state of Florida recently passed legislation under Chapter 163 Florida statutes, which requires cities to add a property rights element to their comprehensive plan. The law was signed by Governor DeSantis and took effect on July 1 of this year. In effect, it states that governmental entities must respect judicially acknowledged and constitutionally protected private property rights, and that each local government shall include in its comp plan a property rights element to ensure that private property rights are considered when making these decisions. In other words, it would appear that the intent of the legislature is to specifically restate what's already the law, in that cases of law and the Florida Constitution must be followed in the decision-making process, stating that property owners are free to use, maintain, develop, and improve their properties subject to state and local ordinances, and to have privacy on their property and dispose of their property through sale and gift. So I'd like to go ahead and read that recommendation and hopefully answer any questions that you may have on that. For case number CPTA 21-224, July 22, 2021, Planning and Zoning Division is recommending approval of this request for the following reasons. One, the proposed amendment to the city's comprehensive plan is in accordance with the legislative intent expressed in sections 163, 3161, parentheses 10, and section 187, 101, parentheses 3, that governmental entities respect judicially acknowledged and constitutionally protected private property rights. And then 2, the proposed property rights element is mandated to ensure that property rights are considered in the city's decision-making processes. And 3, the proposed amendment will support the intent of the Florida legislature. The action requested is to vote to approve the proposed property rights element amendment as an additional element to the city's comprehensive plan and forward to the city commission for consideration. Mr. Chairman, within the city's comprehensive plan, a comprehensive plan is a blueprint for growth of a community, growth and development of a community over a specified time period. And they're divided into elements which we would think of as chapters or subject matter. Everything from airport to water to wastewater, land use, those types of topics. The legislature has expressed its intent to respect private property rights of the property owner and has therefore required all comp plans to have a property rights element. In this case, you've been provided with the ordinance, which should be on the next slide or two there, and then the specific wording. This entire element will take up all of about half a page as a chapter or element in the comprehensive plan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on it? Please state your name and your address.
My name is Terry Blessing, and I live at 24913 Blue Sink Road in unincorporated Lake County. My question is for Mr. Miller. As you have changed this wording according to the law, how is that going to affect the city's approval or not approval of developments that are directly affected in that 163 statute?
It does not, because the city is already observing all of these policies.
Is it written, like are those written in your approvals that you've acknowledged those?
This is the amendment which requires this specific wording. It's required by the legislature. And as long as these policies will be the same as any other policy in the comp plan. So as long as we do those, which we have been doing, then everything will be the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wanted to clarify what you just said. So we're doing already what's asked for us to be done. It's already being done.
That's correct. This requirement is really summed up in the federal Constitution, the Florida Constitution, the laws of Florida. So the legislature wanted it to be added to comprehensive plans. I don't know the specific background as to why, but these practices and objectives and policies, this objective in these policies are already considered as a part of the decision-making process.
Thank you. Sorry. All right, is there any other quick? Oh.
Yeah, one quick one. Mr. Miller, if I'm understanding this right, there's really not a lot of choice here.
The legislature has decreed that all cities adopt it. So you can either adopt it as they provided the wording, or you can come up with your own wording. And we spoke, I think Candy spoke to DEO earlier today. We would be one of the first cities in Florida to adopt it.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll close the public and render a decision.
Make a motion to approve CPTA-21-224.
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Okey-doke. Everybody's got their papers in? Good. I just keep looking at you because you're right in front of me. I'm sorry. You always focus at somebody. I started thinking about it. I said, I wonder if he thinks something. Anyway, new business number 2, public hearing case LSCP 21-119, Whispering Hills Large-Scale Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to request your permission to take these two cases together for discussion purposes, as they are related. For LSCP, which is the Large-Scale Comp Plan 21-119, and case PUD 21-120. By way of background, this project is known as Mar-San/Whispering Hills. The applicant is requesting a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment from Lake County Rural and Rural Transition to City of Leesburg Neighborhood Mixed Use, and they are also requesting a rezoning from Lake County Agriculture to City of Leesburg Planned Unit Development. The proposal, if approved at the City Commission level, would allow future development of a proposed mixed-use site with single-family, multifamily, and commercial uses consisting of a maximum 2,942 residential units on 1,088 acres for a density of 2.7 units per acre. And of this acreage, of the 1,088, there are approximately 44 acres proposed for commercial development. As this property is currently under Lake County jurisdiction, these two applications will be joined by an annexation application when the property is heard by the City Commission. At this point, we anticipate that to be September 13. Candy Harper, Senior Planner with the office, will present the maps and photo exhibits, including aerial zoning, future and surrounding land use, wetlands, flood zones, and CRA maps.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. On the screen in front of you is the aerial showing the area in the county where the property is located. If you can make them out, the hash marks cover the entirety of the parcels that are involved in the development.
If y'all need to get up to take a look at that, get a better look, that's okay. Sorry.
This is the zoning map showing the zoning for the city of Leesburg. The areas in color are the zoning in the city of Leesburg. So what you'll see is this property abuts, in some cases, properties that are already planned unit development. And to the north, there is residential estate property, but it is not adjacent to this subject property. And this slide shows the surrounding zoning that exists in Lake County today. And you'll see that the hash marks may be a little easier to see, and I believe the entirety of it for the zoning is agriculture. It is surrounded by, I believe it's CFD's Community Facility District, along with a little bit of planned unit development and residential mobile home park. And this is the proposed zoning. This is what it will look like should it be approved through the City Commission in the state of Florida. That's a little bit easier to see. That is the property. It's all proposed to be planned unit development. And the future land use for the city of Leesburg that does abut it is institutional and estate residential. Lake County future land use shows rural transition and urban low density in the area. This is the proposed future land use. They are asking for neighborhood mixed use because of the mix of uses they intend to have in the development. And the surrounding land uses track pretty well with both the zoning and the future land use. There's agricultural lands and single-family residences to the north. There's some commercial to the west. There's also agriculture to the west. Some single-family residential to the south and some to the east of the property, as well as agricultural uses. And a wetlands map will show you where the developer will need to be paying attention to encroachments within the wetlands. And that tracks pretty closely with the flood zones. So those structures in those areas will have to be built to flood standards. And this also is in Commission District 3. And we did post the property. As usual, we take a close-up of the posting. And then we take pictures into the property to show you where it was posted in relation to the property. And the next picture on the top is looking south from the sign posting. Picture on the bottom is looking north from the sign posting. And then just pictures along number 2 road where we posted signs along number 2 road. And we did that pretty extensively, and you can see that it is open. It is agricultural and residential. This is looking south from a sign posting along Turkey Lake Road and looking north from the sign posting along Turkey Lake Road. This is at that 90-degree turn where we took these pictures into the property. And then again, a little bit down the road, we took a picture of the posting at number 2 road. And then the top picture is looking northwest along number 2 road from where we posted the sign. And the bottom picture is looking west across number 2 road from the sign posting. Top picture is looking north along number 2 road, and the bottom picture is looking east across number 2 road. And then this is the last picture we took, which is around that little subdivision that was never developed. And this is looking north along number 2 road from where we posted that sign. And the map at the bottom has little stars on it showing you where those signs are actually found around the proposed development. And that's all I have, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. With that, we move to the departmental review summary. You can see that within this request, we received significant substantive responses, 2 in particular one from the Lake County School Board with concerns about capacities, and the other with Lake County Public Works, who were also commenting about requirements for the roads. Under the, and we'll get to those a little bit more later, under the public responses, at a minimum, we've received 32 disapprovals, and there are notes in your packet with letters and petitions and signatures And I have some additional letters here that have come in. So there has been a tremendous amount of public response on that. We did receive 3 approvals, believe it or not. So at this point, I need to take a moment and read the recommendations into the record. I'd like to briefly go over the PUD document under the conditions so that it shows what, if this is eventually approved, what the conditions would be. And then at that point, the applicant would like to give a presentation on the screen, please. So beginning with let me get my pages back here. The recommendation for the large-scale comprehensive plan. There we go. For LSCP 21-119, large-scale comprehensive plan map amendment, Planning and Zoning Divisions recommending approval of the request for the following reasons. 1, the project meets the requirements of Chapter 163, 3184 Florida statutes for large-scale comprehensive plan amendments. 2, the proposed future land use designation of City of Leesburg neighborhood mixed use is compatible with adjacent properties that have future land use designations, which include City of Leesburg estate, residential, institutional, and with property in Lake County having future land use designations of rural and rural transition. 3, the proposed zoning classification of PUD plan unit development as conditioned is compatible with adjacent properties in the City of Leesburg that are also zoned PUD, Lake County zonings of community facility, mobile home rental park, and residential professional, agricultural, and R1 residential. 4, the proposed future land use designation for the site is consistent with the city's growth management plan, future land use element goal 1, objective 1.6. The action requested is vote to approve the large-scale comp plan amendment designation from Lake County rural and rural transition to City of Leesburg neighborhood mixed use, and forward this recommendation to the City Commission for their consideration. Under PUD 21-120, Planning and Zoning Division is recommending approval of the request under these reasons. 1, the proposed request to rezone the properties from Lake County A to City of Leesburg PUD to allow for a neighborhood mixed-use development containing a mix of residential uses, town center, hotel, office, and commercial uses, and recreational amenities on property legally described in Exhibit B dated April 1, 2021 is consistent with the appropriate legally mandated planning and development practices in Florida, including the establishment of zoning districts and supporting land development regulations. 2, the proposed request as conditioned is compatible with the adjacent property zone PUD, plan unit development, and with Lake County Community Facility District, residential professional, mobile home rental park, agricultural, and rural residential. 3, the proposed request, again as conditioned, is compatible with the proposed future land use designation of neighborhood mixed use and with adjacent properties under the future land use designations of City of Leesburg estate, residential, and institutional, and Lake County rural transition and rural. 4, the proposed request is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, future land use element goal 1, objective 1.6. The action requested again is vote to approve the proposed rezoning from Lake County agriculture to City of Leesburg plan unit development, which is dated July 22, 2021, together with exhibits A through D and attachments LCPW1 and LCSB1 attached here too, and forward to the City Commission for their consideration. Under the highlights of the proposed PUD, these PUDs have to be written so that if it is approved eventually at City Commission, it has conditions that control the development. And as a summary of these, I'll go through it beginning in page 1 of the PUD document itself. This development proposal contains a maximum of 2,942 total residential units on approximately 1,088 acres, with approximately 44 acres of that being town center, commercial, hotel, plus medical and office uses, consisting of approximately 451,000 square feet of those types of uses. This would be, again, residential, multifamily, commercial, hotel, medical. Typical permitted uses are detached single-family residential units, which makes up the majority of it. Some attached single-family single-family units, and attached single-family is a townhouse. You own both the land and the building above it. Multifamily restaurants, diners, bakeries, banking, medical and dental office, churches, houses of worship, daycares, assisted living. There's also a significant portion for recreational uses, pool, clubhouse, golf, and equestrian center. There's also, if this goes through at the city commission level, interim agricultural uses are allowed to continue for a significant period of time. There are prohibited uses such as bars, lounges, clubs, industrial, tattoo parlors, adult uses, things of that nature. Under the land area, 623 of those acres would be residential, 43 would be commercial. The remaining is generally going to be wetlands. The lot sizes range 50 by 120 and 70 by 135 and 70 by 140. There are minimum house size standards of 1,700 and 1,800 square feet, respectively. 2-car garages are required. The development standards would fall under the city's C3 highway commercial development standards, which is standard for a development of this size. At least 20% of the site, of the commercial portion of the site, has to be developed as open space. The height maximum on the commercial portion would be 3 stories and 45 feet. There are design and architectural standards on the residential side that have requirements, and there are examples in the back of your PUD to show that. For the non-residential side, any development would have to come under Ordinance 1635, which is in Section 25360 of the City of Leesburg Code of Ordinances, which holds the commercial architectural standards for all new buildings in the City of Leesburg. There are significant landscape buffers in this plan. A minimum 50-foot wide buffer tract with plantings, as shown in the figures A and B, which are also in the PUD, have to be provided on the property line of all areas which share a common border with property in unincorporated Lake County and are currently zoned for agricultural or residential uses, which is essentially every property around the outer border. In addition to this buffer, there's required a 4-foot split rail fence or a 6-foot solid fence has to be provided on the property line. If the solid fence option is chosen, then it has to be PVC or synthetic material. It can't be a wood fence that rots away very quickly. Within this document on page 8, you'll see the phase and fence location that matches up with the site plan you'll see shortly. On landscape and buffers under the non-residential side, there are solid brick or stucco type walls required in all areas where commercial development is directly adjacent to less intense development. That's a standard that's in the City of Leesburg in development anywhere in town, and we just brought it out here as a requirement. There's also a chart that shows the location of the phase, such as phase 1, the north property line would have a 6-foot wall, and it goes through the others. Each commercial building has a 5-foot landscape buffer around the buildings. Significant amounts, again, of open space are throughout the property. The wetlands are preserved. Under site access and improvements, the Lake County Public Works Department sent over a letter describing significant amounts of work that would be required to be done if this were to be approved, and that is attached in the back as attachment LCPW1, which talks about different changes to roadways. It's stating they did not want access in certain areas, and we can pull that out if I can find that one specifically. If you'd give me just a moment.
Sure. I think that's important.
I'll come back to that, but it is in the letter, and I'll find that in just a moment and let you know. There it is. No access from Turkey Lake Road can occur from this development was a statement that is included in this PUD. In addition, Lake County School Board also sent in a letter with concerns regarding capacities of schools, and basically what they stated is that if this development were approved, Leesburg High School would be at 98% of capacity. So Leesburg High School is right now a little bit under that. Oak Park Middle, and this would be based on what the school zones should be at that time. Oak Park Middle School would be at 118%, Leesburg Elementary would be at 179%. So one of the conditions in this PUD is that the developer would have to get with both the school board and the Public Works Department of Lake County, because they're responsible for their respective responsibilities. The Lake County would have to come up with an agreement with these folks to provide the necessary seats or schools or whatever is necessary to make that work and keep it under capacity. We did require a separate school use site within this, or an agreement with the school board. In addition there, I don't know if I mentioned this, golf cart paths are provided along the entire main boulevard roadway. And then 3 acres dedicated to the city for support services. There are significant protections for wetlands, flood zones, and wildlife, including wetland jurisdictional lines that would have to be identified, conservation easements that would be required on the wetlands, which a gentleman approached me before the meeting, and I missed telling him that we do require conservation easements. Buildings have to be 50 feet from wetlands, so there's a wildlife management plan. Then finally, under recreation, 588,400 square feet, which works out to about 13.5 acres, would be required under recreation to include golf course, equestrian center, swimming pool, children's playground, ball fields, courts, 27-hole golf course. I know that's an odd number, but it would be 9 holes in 3 different places. So lighting requirements, we added dark sky standards, which is a way of requiring lights to come back to the inside of the development and be shielded, and it's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the quick answer. With that, I believe Tara Tedrow from the Lowndes Law Firm in Orlando is here to make a presentation as well.
Thank you very much. Tara Tedrow, Lowndes Law, 215 North Yola Drive, Orlando, Florida. I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm going to do this a lot to get her to help change my slides. So if you're wondering why I'm pointing at her, that's the only reason. So on this slide, if you go through a couple more of the bullet points, you can see, and as you heard from Dan, I'll try not to repeat too much of what he articulated is in the PUD, but it's approximately 1,088 acres with a mixed-use development consisting of a maximum of 2,942 residential units, which are attached and detached single-family and multifamily options, not to exceed 2.7 dwelling units per acre gross. 44 acres of town center comprised of 451,000 total square feet of options for commercial, hotel, medical, and office uses, and 3 acres dedicated to the city for support services. If you look at that chart, there's nearly 420 acres of open space and wetland contemplated for this site. And that wetland is going to have to go, to the extent practicable, into conservation easements. So for those who are concerned about impacts to wetlands, it's very clear in the PUD the type of impacts that we're allowed to make and the type of conservation we have to place permanently over those existing wetlands. In addition, there's about 35% overall open space that's required on the entirety of the project. Next slide, please. So our request is for a recommendation of approval consistent with staff's for the large-scale comp plan amendment, as well as a recommendation of approval for our PUD rezoning. Under those PUD development standards specifically, you can see that the project is to be developed in phases with an implementation commencing within 120 months of approval of the PUD. I understand that this looks like a significant project, and it is. And if you think about it from a planning perspective, the reason you have a growth management plan and not a growth prohibition plan is because you have to account for new people who are and will come into this community. And you want to do that in a sustainable way. So rather than having just subdivision after subdivision by different developers that does not have any sort of comprehensive vision or cohesion between the types of developments, a master planned community is really the ideal planning strategy to account for and accommodate the type of growth that is certainly coming to Lake County. In addition, this is intended to be an age-targeted community. It's supposed to be a high-end community that's going to be connected by pedestrian and bicycle paths. We're going to have a golf course and required equestrian facilities. The reason that we intentionally and thoughtfully designed this out to have those types of equestrian facilities, to incorporate the golf course, to have a significant amount of open space, is because it was intended to be compatible with the existing development in the area. So we incorporated those features, and those aren't promises from a developer, those are mandates under a PUD. So we want this to be the type of community that can still maintain a rural lifestyle while providing opportunities to have accessibility to the types of things that people need in their everyday lives. When you hear a lot of complaints about traffic, the reason that most of our roads are clogged is because we have to drive everywhere in a vehicle to get everything we need. When you can master plan out a mixed-use community, and the reason your comprehensive plan is so clear about encouraging that type of mixed-use development is because we're able to have those provision of everyday services, reduce the vehicle trips necessary to get them, and really give a live, work, play option in a very different type of setting than what currently exists in the city. Go to the next slide, please. This just shows you the overall commercial tract summary, the amount of square footage and the amount of acreage that's permitted. Keep in mind that in addition to this, there is that 3-acre site that will be dedicated to the city for support services. So the city can utilize that for fire, police, emergency, or any other municipal uses. The next slide just gives you the commercial development standards that Dan already went through about the maximum 80% impervious surface area ratio, the C3 commercial zoning standards, minimum 20% open space, that's just on the commercial. Remember, it's still 35% that must be maintained at a minimum overall, and then specific architectural standards as well. This is your residential unit summary that gets you to the total lot count discussed in the beginning. And this is the breakdown for the different types of lots. There are very specific standards under the PUD that set forth how we can build any of the lots and the lot sizes that correspond with it. We have to build those at a minimum. So we can go with bigger lots, but at a minimum it has to be the depths and the widths that we've set forth here. When it comes to residential development standards, there's a mandate for architectural diversity, which means we're not trying to bring a cookie-cutter subdivision of tract housing that has the same house one after another in a row down the street. And again, that's a PUD requirement. Maximum 2-story height, minimum 2-car garages, 65% impervious surface area ratio, minimum setbacks and building footprint requirements, and a minimum of 80% of the homes have to be connected to natural gas water heater and natural gas furnace. And then here's some of those architectural design standards. All of these came from your staff, so we didn't give any suggestions whatsoever as the applicant. We actually got this just a couple days ago and are happy with all of the standards that your staff has suggested because, again, they were very thoughtfully designed around what your code and your comprehensive plan contemplate as part of smart growth strategies for your city. So all of these provide for different design standards to give visual relief and to really have an architectural enhancement in the communities that we're going to bring. Here are some more design standards. I promise I will not read this word for word, but this is taken directly from the PUD agreement that talks again about the different types of architectural diversity and the heightened standards that we have to meet specific to this development. There's just a couple bullet points on that one too, please. When it comes to buffering and landscaping requirements, and by the way, I see a lot of folks getting their cameras out. Those visuals might not be very good. I am more than happy to share this PowerPoint with anybody afterwards. So I'm going to stick around. If anybody has questions, I'll give you my contact information. We'll send you our concept plans. I'll send you this PowerPoint presentation. And we're open to suggestions, comments, and feedback. But when it comes to buffering and landscaping, the 50-foot wide buffer plus plantings and a fence along the property lines of any portion of our property that we share with a common border with Lake County properties zoned ag or residential. Some very specific requirements for commercial uses, even if it's internal next to residential. 50-foot separations from wetland jurisdiction boundaries and landscaping per code with some additional requirements. So things like 2 canopy trees for every 100 linear feet of property line that we have. When it comes to roadway designs, the main access to the property is going to be off US Highway 27, which makes the most sense from a functionality standpoint. There's a requirement for a boulevard type that we have to have coming off 27, central point with a roundabout design and all phases having a direct opening. One of the reasons that we were really attracted to this site is because of the topography of it. And if you look at that spine road that's going to go through our concept plan, and I understand the concept plan may be dual functionality as a vision test because it is probably very small in your packet, but if you look at the spine road that travels through our property, our hope is to maintain and try to incorporate those hills in our roadways. We are not wanting to come in and clear cut this property and grade it down. And we're not looking, as my engineer said before this, why would we turn beautiful hills that enhance property values and that enhance the aesthetic features and take advantage of what is really beautiful topography out there and turn it into a tabletop? That's not what we want to do, and that's not what we will do with this development. So we are going to be incorporating that natural topography. So that main access road will come off, and it'll go through all the different phases of the project. Our sidewalks will have cross connections to recreational and residential areas. And then again, because this is supposed to be an age-targeted community, we're incorporating, not that age-targeted necessarily means you're the only ones who enjoy golf carts, but we will have golf cart paths and parking provided throughout the project. When it comes to recreational requirements, there's 13.5 acres of rec space. That's obviously not taking into consideration our golf course and our equestrian. And you can see that there are some robust recreational requirements about having at least one primary active rec area, constructed in conjunction and completed no later than a CO for the first 250 units, 2 separate additional rec areas constructed to include our golf course and 10-acre equestrian facility completed prior to the CO of 500 residential units. The reason that's important is because oftentimes developers will come in and they will promise you beautiful recreational amenities and then they never build them, or they wait to build them at the very end. You can see that we do have over quite an expansive amount of acreage, a good number of residential units planned. At just 250, we're already starting that rec at a minimum. At 500, we have a sizable portion of all of our recreational amenities in. So no one's going to move in and just cross their fingers that in 20 years they're going to get a golf course. We're phasing this development, but it's probably going to be phased over 5 years. So within 5 years, we're going to have hopefully a fully built out community. So you get that golf course, that equestrian facility, and recreational amenities very early on into this project. Again, those are PUD mandates. In addition, there's required amenities like golf courses, equestrian, swimming pools, clubhouses, playground areas, trails, and other activities. When it comes to traffic, traffic is a concern everywhere I go when it comes to developments, and rightfully so. These are the roads that you have to drive on day in and day out, and sometimes the roads are challenging because there's a lot of traffic. Sometimes they're challenging because there's really not any traffic, and so it's substandard design, or it's a substandard roadway that the county or the city or FDOT has not allocated in their budget improvements for. And so often it takes developers to be the ones that fund these types of infrastructure improvements for areas. So we have our traffic engineer here. This is far above my pay grade if you have very specific questions, but she would be happy to answer them. We did a very lengthy study. That study is done by the guidelines and methodologies set forth by the Lake Sumter MPO. It goes through an extensive review process, and you can see just how far out we had to review the transportation networks that would be impacted by vehicles generated by our trip. And so this slide just shows you how we calculated out all of those different build-outs for vehicles. And then the real conclusions here show that we have been told a number of different types of improvements that would need to be made to accommodate this growth. And as I stated in the beginning, growth is certainly coming to this area, but the infrastructure improvements aren't budgeted yet. So this would be something that the developer would be paying for. And if you go to the next slide, we did a breakdown. And in addition to what's probably about $30 million of impact fee payments, so impact fees are paid prior to pulling building permits specific to the type of development that you have, we would be paying an addition of, at a low end, probably $24 million of just transportation improvements. And so those transportation improvements do things like road widening, making roads standard in their width, ensuring that you have signals when warranted at different intersections. And all of that is not dictated by the developer saying he'd like to do this or would like not to do this. These are mandated, again, by the direct impacts that you have to mitigate in order to develop. So all of this must be done for us to be able to move forward with our project. And the same is true for any type of level of service issues, whether it's utilities or schools or transportation networks. Before we can pull permits, we have to go to the respective governmental agencies that issue these permits and review these requests and ensure that we've checked all the boxes and designed this according to their requirements. So we wouldn't be able to pull permits and start building homes and moving in families unless and until there was capacity in the schools to handle it, or unless we entered into an agreement to specifically mitigate for those impacts, or to construct a new school to be able to handle any of the school-age children that could be generated by a development. There's overcrowding in a lot of different schools. I was fortunate to sit on the Orange County School Impact Fee Advisory Board, and it's a challenge in every county on how do we sustain growth and deal with new kids coming when our schools are crowded. But new schools aren't built unless there is demand for new schools to be built. So as new projects come online, that's how those types of payments go to be able to build new schools, and it was very clear in the PUD agreement as well that that would be a requirement. So when it comes to your growth management plan as well as your code, that's what you're asked to evaluate as a member of the Planning Commission, and that's what the City Council is tasked to evaluate when making a determination as to whether you should approve a project or not. And those policies are intended to create some certainty for applicants. You know, the property rights you talked about on the item before us on the agenda is very important. People should have the expectation that if they want to go in and try to do something with their property, they know the process, and therefore specific requirements are set forth in criteria that have to be met. As part of our application, we submitted analysis as to how we met those policies, and the staff's recommendation, which is your professional staff, and their testimony can be considered competent and substantial evidence. Their professional opinion was that we met the applicable policies. So the project would add residential and non-residential features, and keep in mind those non-residential features are not meant to be strip center commercial development. Again, that would not be permitted with the way that it is contemplated under our concept plan or the PUD. These are neighborhood scale requirements. Something interesting about the neighborhood mixed-use element of your comprehensive plan is that it's very clear that it allows for that type of neighborhood scale development, but interestingly enough, so does the low density residential future land use under your comprehensive plan. It also contemplates having some commercial that's allowable on a neighborhood scale. And your low density future land use designation actually allows for a higher density than we're even asking for. So remember, ours is 2.7 gross dwelling units per acre on the entire policy. So the objectives that we have and that we provide are a diverse array of housing options. We provide those residential and non-residential options with significant acreage dedicated to recreation, as well as amenitized features. Your GMP has objectives and policies, such as diversity for housing, having sustainable development and a smart growth development pattern that makes efficient use of developable land. Next slide shows you policy 1.4.1 about mixed-use development, encouraging that within the city, and ensuring appropriate buffers for compatibility. One item on compatibility is that compatibility determinations aren't made just by putting the exact same things next to each other. If they were, we would never be able to say anything was compatible, short of an entire city being one use. So compatibility is looked at from a couple different levels. You look at compatibility with what is existing, what is planned to be built or approved to be built adjacent, and then what should be allowed in the future to sustain some of that growth. And that's why those mixed-use policies are really quite important under your comp plan. And then to ensure that you have different population densities, housing types, employment patterns, and land use consistent with the city's transportation network. And I won't read all of these, but these were your PUD rezoning criteria that we also submitted within our application that we met. And the project will bring a mix of different opportunities into the area. It'd be designed to ensure that appropriate buffering and setbacks so that it is compatible, so that we have those transitions of uses, and that will help absorb and serve as a significant portion of the city's anticipated future growth. I mean, there's probably going to be about 5.2 million people as residents in the next 11 years in the Central Florida region, and that's probably on the low end of the estimates as this was done pre-COVID. So we know how quick people are moving here, and the hope is that we're designing something that is going to be far above, again, just having disparate cookie-cutter residential subdivisions, one after another, which are going to come one way or another. So our hope is that we have a very thoughtfully designed master planned community that ensures compatibility with the existing area and provides for that appropriate transition and buffering. So that's why the purpose of the PUD district is there to give some comprehensive development strategies of large or substantially vacant areas, which is exactly what we're doing here with that flexible design, allows for a flexible response to the market, and encourages innovative subdivision and site plan designing. So your staff recommendation, as Dan said earlier, was a recommendation for approval with the 4 reasons noted in your report. And that's the same recommendation of approval you'll see as well on the next slide for your PUD rezoning as well. So the next slide is just our request again is recommendation of approval consistent with your professional staff's recommendation of approval for our large-scale comprehensive plan amendment as well as approval of our rezoning. I appreciate your time and consideration. I understand there's probably a few folks in here who may want to get up and speak. I'd ask for the opportunity to respond when they're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you go ahead and put a site plan up while we talk?
I think we have that on slide, let's see. Maybe like slide, or you might have a better copy of it.
Okay, before we go to the public, does the commission have any questions of the applicant?
I got a couple.
All right, go ahead.
Did you say this was an age-restricted community?
Age-targeted community,
And what's the targeted age?
55 and up. 55 and up, yep, age targeted. Age restricted just means it has to be a deed restriction. So our design and the way that we're going to market it is going to be age targeted. If we end up doing deed restricted, we'll have that flexibility, but again, it's intended to be an age targeted community.
So, I mean, you're not looking for, obviously, those younger than 55 to purchase and reside in the.
We wouldn't prohibit it, again, because it's just going to be age targeted, but if we want to come in and have certain portions be only 55 and up, we would certainly designate that in a deed restriction, which would also be a requirement to account for whether we could have school-age children for capacity determinations as well.
Okay, you mentioned a timeline, two different timelines actually, so are we talking about 120 months from approval to completion, and then 5 years from breaking ground? What's the difference between the 60 and 120 month time frame?
Yeah, and I apologize if that was confusing. I think the slide you're talking about is where I said that the requirement under the PUD is the project shall commence within 120 months of approval. So that just tells you that it's going to expire if we don't start our work pretty quickly after we get approved, which, you know, we are excited to be able to break ground as soon as we would be able to and start to get that permit process started. But it would likely be over a period of 5 years after that commencement of construction that we would anticipate full build out.
Is that it?
There
No, I
was
mean,
a-
is that it for Trev?
Oh, done?
Go ahead.
I had something.
There was a lot of comment on, in our packet here regarding ingress and egress. And I know you said you weren't the traffic engineer, but maybe someone could kind of go through that for everybody.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to take a breath and let her talk instead.
Jodelle Zabalero, VHB, consultant for the project, 225 East Robinson Street, Orlando, Florida, 32801. So the traffic analysis looks at the total development. So we're looking at a 2030 build out for the project. We analyzed it with access off of US 27 as well as access off of number 2 road. About 70% of that traffic is destined to US 27. 40% heading north, and then the remainder, about 30% heading south. And then the remainder of that going to number 2 road is also destined towards State Road 19. So we've looked at I don't know if, can you bring up the study area that had the roadway and intersections in her PowerPoint presentation? So we're not just looking at the egress and ingress out of the project, but the whole, it's approximately about 3.55 miles radius to the site. So there are the recommendations for the ingress on US 27 include a traffic signal at build out and potential traffic signals at number 2 road at County Road 48 as well as State Road 19. Does that answer your question, or do you need further information regarding the driveway access?
The way you designed the traffic study, did you design it with the fact that you're accounting for the golf carts and all the other intercommunity traffic?
So the golf carts are internally captured trips, so there is some of that because you do have a mix of uses, residential to office, residential to retail, as well as your recreational facilities. So there is a percentage of traffic that is internally captured, but about, I would say it's close to 70% of the traffic is still destined outside of the development. So it's not like we're saying that we're not having a lot of impacts because we're capturing, 50%, 75%. We're still on the conservative side saying that, it's more like 70% of the traffic is still destined outside of the development.
Ingress and egress from the development.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a concern. Have you seen number 2 road?
I have, well, just from the slides. I have not had a chance. I've had discussions, I've seen it through Google Maps, and I've had discussions with the county regarding their concerns of number 2 road, knowing that it is substandard with 18 feet wide roadway, that if the connection is made to number 2, they would require that to be built up to a standard 2-lane roadway, which would have 12-foot lanes, 4-foot paved shoulders, sidewalks on both sides. So it's not anticipated that we're just going to connect and not do any improvements, but part of the list that was presented in terms of proportionate share or mitigation that would be needed is a cost for upgrading number 2 roadway.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's just that's a concern
No,
that
I
I'm seeing in my
understand.
notes here.
And it is something that was related to us from Lake County.
In regards to the school issue, what are your, I know it's age targeted, so that I know you're not going to entirely rule out younger families, and you see that it is going to substantially impact our kids in lower education. So what, and this is for the residents that are here, what do you propose to the school board to help us alleviate some of that burden that you're going to put on there? I know you offered the city 3 acres for use, but have you thought about some type of school or something like that as part of your project?
And that's a great question. And part of what the PUD says in the Lake County letter that we received from the school board is very clear that we don't get to choose how we mitigate. They tell us how they want us to mitigate the impacts. So, for example, if the whole project was age restricted, meaning deed restrictions 55 and up only, we would generate 0 school-age children. As we go to pull building permits, if some of those properties are age restricted, that would then change the total calculation of the amount of capacity that we would be having to look at in the schools. So we do that at building permit, and then the school board tells us either we have no capacity, you need to pay us, and to specifically mitigate for each of the number of children that you generate, and for the schools that there is no capacity to accommodate those children, or you have to do other alternative things, whether that's a dedication of property for a school or contributions towards building.
We understand that because that's what we have around here.
Sure.
But I was just saying, as a gesture of goodwill, of course, you can't dictate what the school board is going to tell you, but I'm saying, are you putting yourself in a position where you could offer up something like that, as you're offering the city 3 acres for maintenance? Would you be willing to offer up elementary, pre-K, something, because I just have to be honest with you, and we mentioned this before, you got to make this, favorable for the community.
Sure.
So what olive branches are you extending to the community besides 3 golf courses?
And I appreciate that recommendation. We just received the letter from the school board last Friday, so we haven't had an opportunity to really engage substantively with them as to what mitigation efforts, if any, they would propose as an alternative just to the traditional payment per student anticipated to be generated. That's certainly a conversation that we are willing to have with the school board. I know in Lake County there's an entire document about Lake County School Board siting policies.
Right.
So the county doesn't just take any site that would be donated. There's specific acreage, specific requirements for where they could site a school anyway, given the proximity to other existing schools in the area. So that's a conversation that Even if we donated land, I would hate for anybody to assume that the school board's actually going to build a school there, because they may not.
They have.
But but that's a conversation that I am more than happy to have, and I know your staff will certainly hold my feet to the fire on that one, and we can engage with the school board just to see what options, if any, might be able to exist. But certainly part of what we tried to give in this development was what we think will be an amenity to those existing residents who may want a different lifestyle option. Again, we didn't write the PUD at all. So we took everything that the staff said, this is what we would want you to put out there if it were to be approved. And that included, donation of some acreage, permanent conservation easements, demand for equestrian facilities and for golf rather than just an option for those things. So we were happy to accommodate those types of requests, and I appreciate that feedback, and we'll engage further with Helen Valley over at the school board on the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I got you. Obviously, if we're talking 3-5 years out before houses going to market, do you have, in today's dollars, a rough idea of what kind of price range we're talking about on your single family?
Probably starting at around $250 for some of those single family, at about 1,800 or 1,700 square feet.
Yeah.
And then
Top of the
you
range?
can go up from there.
So a buyer could customize and build out as they desired?
Yes.
Okay. And then what kind of materials, building materials on single family?
So there's a slide that sets forth all of the different types of building materials that we would have to have, and I can pull that here. So some of the design standards were at least 3 of the following features for visual relief. That's everything from dormers, gables, recessed or raised entries, covered porches, pillars, decorative posts, bay windows, eaves, garage vehicle doors incorporating very specific paneling elements, shutters, stone accents, hardy board, raised banding, craftsman-style garage doors. So again, at least 3 of those have to be provided, and that all gets reviewed by your staff prior to us being able to pull permits. And then the next one shows some additional standards that are required for exterior building materials, and that says at least 35% full-width brick or stone, at least 30% full-width brick or stone, with the balance being stucco or some sort of lap siding.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm talking about on the SFRs, are we talking about sticks or bricks?
I'm not sure if we've gotten far enough to be able to determine exactly what type of, if it's concrete or if it's going to be stick built on the single-family residential homes.
And we're looking at facades, doesn't matter, actual building materials is what I'm
Okay.
questioning.
A preference for one, I assume?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm done, thank you.
One additional, on the land areas, if you could go through this, the 667 is what you intend to develop, and then I think you got 418 or 419, it depends on how you total it, is green area. 200 is wetlands. The 215, that includes your golf courses, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other?
Oh, one last question, and this goes back to the traffic. Dewey Robbins, not to create any kind of issue, but Dewey Robbins is a much more substantial road to the south. Why wasn't that considered?
At the time, so when we were doing the traffic analysis and the methodology, it was not contemplated for access directly onto Dewey. That discussion is still open with Lake County because of their concerns with number 2 road. They have stated that there is a better chance to provide the capacity on Dewey Road to access US 27 and State Road 19.
I was just reading the Lake County report, and they made that comment.
Yes.
I was just wondering.
So that has been conveyed to us as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any others? All right. Okay. To make this as efficient and easy as possible, each speaker will have 3 minutes. I'm going to read through I'll call your name. If your subject matter has already been addressed, please, pass up. If you got something new, I definitely want to hear it. We're discussing both cases at the same time. And, and also, please remember that this is a recommendation to the city commission. So whether it passes or fails, it's going to go to the city commission. So make sure you check out those dates. So what we'll do is I'll have everybody, each person gets up, have your statement. If you have questions, go ahead and ask your questions. And if the applicant will make note of the questions, then we'll just have her come up and answer everybody's questions at one time instead of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Does that sound fair? All right. Okey doke. First up the bat, Christian Hutchcroft. Christian, are you here? Okey doke. How about Keisha Hutchcroft? This meeting's going faster than I thought. I can't hear you. Okay. Could somebody check? And then we'll go to the next person. Wendy Sykes. Well, we're striking out here, aren't we? So who are you guys? That's Wendy. And then Chastine Sykes. Chastine Sykes.
It's not me, but I just couldn't hear you.
Nope. Ben Sykes. All right, we got somebody. Please state your name and your address, please.
My name is Ben Sykes. My address is 24249 Turkey Lake Road, Howard in the Hills, Florida. I believe that we may have overproduced paperwork. That was my whole family that you just called for.
That's okay.
So I think we were thinking that we were just signing in, that we were coming here, not necessarily to talk. So we don't necessarily have anything to say now. We're basically just trying to listen and see what,
That's fine.
what the developer's trying to propose. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't have to speak if you don't want to, so we're not going to force you to do anything you don't want to. I don't think. I don't know. It's early. I'll skip all the Sykes then. Got a bunch of Sykes. Okay. Marlene Gardner? Marlene Garner? Okay. Patricia Brown?
Tim, we might be better off just asking whoever wants to speak from the line on the podium.
Well, trying to keep a little order too at the same time. Paul Densler? All right. This is a first. Please state your name and your address, please.
Name is Paul Densler. I live in 26109 Newcomb Circle. And the picture or the sketch that was given with the handouts inviting us, we're in the very upper left corner. And we've lived here for 29 years now, full time. And in that period, we have seen the entire area behind us completely flooded, as far as we can see, to the tree line, which would be about halfway across that sketch. What happens when the construction starts now? Where does that water go? Has St. John's Water Management been approached and approved of this? I am told, when I first got here to the meeting, that that area is going to be a golf course, which means it has to be filled in. Where does the water go when we get another flood? Again, we've had 2 times when the water was so deep you could see ripples in the wind. And a small nest was built by a sandhill crane way out in the middle. That water's got to go somewhere the next time we have a serious rainfall. I've heard, the only mention I heard here was something about the 100-year floodplain. We've only been here 29 years, and we've seen 2 major floods already that impinged on Highland Lakes Properties Owners Association land, which is a 40-foot buffer between our property and the edge of the property that is being proposed by this development. That's not much. Has St. John's been approached and approved this whole thing?
Okay. We will wait for the applicant to come up in a little bit to answer that question. Do you have any other questions or statements?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll make sure that's answered, though.
Okay.
Is that for what he said, or is that because he said something? Sorry. Terry Blessing?
Terry Blessing, Blue Sink Road, that dead ends and opens onto number 2 Road. We will be directly impacted by this development, and I really encourage the traffic person to take a ride down number 2 Road. The reason, first I want to compliment the not scalping of the ground, because I think that is a very positive approach. My concern, though, is when we look at the schools, I don't feel like this development has enough definition for our city to vote on it yet. We have so many unanswered questions, and yet we're here for an advisory as an approval. I'm a state contractor, and I work for the schools. I do more than just build the buildings. I go in the summertime, and I help rehab these schools in Lake and Sumter County. It is more than just a classroom with students and a teacher. It's the air quality, and it's everything that goes into these schools, and we don't even really have a clear definition of the age-targeted community. And I really feel before this gets approved, we need to define what the impact is going to be. That said, I am totally concerned about number 2 Road. I want to put on record that I did reach out to Mr. Marsan several months ago to talk about the lot sizes to see if we couldn't get acreage that backs up to acreage. And the response he said to me was, I am very busy. There will be a time for your inclusion, and now is not the time. I also had one of my neighbors who had an appointment scheduled with him. He did not come to that appointment, and he did not call, and he did not cancel. She had to call him, and I was with her. I would really like this developer to include some of the people that will be directly impacted off of number 2 Road, Turkey Lake Road, and Pumpkin Center Road to be included as they transition into those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Rouston? Rooston, sorry. I knew I was going to be butchering names.
I'm Pam Rustio. I live at 25203 Turkey Lake Road, and I just want to officially present the petition that you received. Did you all get a copy of it? It actually has over 250 signatures, and it outlines concerns regarding the coordination between the city of Leesburg and Lake County, the compatibility with the rural community, the compatibility with the policies in the Leesburg's growth management plan, and the conflicts in the ISBA. Nobody today has mentioned that the bulk of that is actually in the Alaha Lake Apopka Rural Protection Area. So that's supposed to be protected land, not developed. The decision you make today will reflect what you're hearing today from the community, from the people here. And we're hoping that you will propose denial based on the fact that there's more to be looked at. Thank you. Do you need a copy of this?
Joyce Bono? Great. Lee Graffis?
Hi, my name is Lee Graffis. I don't officially live at this address, but 25201 US Highway 27. I am the HOA manager for the Plantation at Leesburg. I'm only here today mostly to ask some questions, one or two to the commission and one to the applicant. My first thing is directed to the applicant. As far as the Plantation, and I think we also would speak for two other communities in the area, we have some concerns over the proposal of the golf course. Within about 3 mile range, there are already 3 developments with golf courses. Ours is one of them. We have 36 holes. Arlington Ridge has a golf course, and so does Royal Highlands. So we have some concerns over the idea that a golf course might draw for the community, but by not having the golf courses, that would actually bring draw to those of us that already have them. So that's one concern. My other question was to the applicant and possibly to the commission. The windmill project that was discussed back in April, would that be considered in part of that? I know they asked for an extension, but that consideration might be something that everybody needs to look at as far as access points. And then my last thing was just to the commission that I would like to remind them, and I don't have skin in the game myself, but back in April when you had the meeting and the builder wanted to build on Dewey Robbins Road, you all did deny it based on the fact that you didn't feel that the Plantation and White Marsh and even the windmill project that has already been approved, you denied that saying it was too rural. So I'm pointing that out as a fact that you did deny that based on saying it didn't fit the comprehensive plan at the time. And then now that this is a larger project, you know, the consideration is that it's appropriate. So that's all I really have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Franklin Pierce. Thank you. Maureen McCullough.
Yes, good evening. Maureen McCallum, 26113 Newcomb Circle in Highland Lakes, and I happen to be Paul Densler's neighbor. My concern is with the wetlands, and they have been mentioned a couple times that they're going to be protected and they're going to be buffers, but can you or anyone give me a yes or no answer? The areas that are currently under the St. John's Water Management District now, will they or will they not ever be built upon by this developer? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah Shecky? Oh, sorry. I just can't read.
Shelley, S-H-E-L-L-E-Y. Good evening, I'm Deborah Shelley, 9710 East Dewey Robbins Road, Howie in the Hills, unincorporated Lake County. I am with the community group Citizens for the Preservation of Rural. The presentation was very interesting, but there's always two sides to the story. From a community perspective, from the folks who live in this area, This project is an absolute affront to our sensibilities, really. The majority... Don't take up my 3 minutes.
I stopped it real quick.
Thank you. Stop the clock. The majority of properties that are adjacent to this project, and as Pam mentioned, I just have to say this again because it has not been mentioned and it's very critical, are located in the Yalaha Lake Apopka Rural Protection Area. This project cuts deep into an established rural community. We would like to see a little more respect and recognition of this existing rural community. Rural communities, and especially this rural protection area, should get equal protection under the rules. And as mentioned, there are Leesburg growth management policies that deal with compatibility and consistency with adjacent areas, and adjacent compatibility is also addressed in the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. There's numerous policies in the Leesburg Growth Management Plan, and I've submitted the policy numbers as part of my written comments. A fundamental tenet of annexation is that projects should be compact and contiguous, and this project is neither compact nor contiguous. There's a lot of parcels. If you look at the concept plan, there's a lot of parcels that have been cobbled together over several miles. They're just a jumble of parcels with projections that stretch out everywhere. And there are properties, several parcels that are completely surrounded on 3 sides by the development, but they are not included in the project. And some of those residents may be here this evening. We would like this project to do better. The density is just too high and should be reduced. The Equestrian Center concept could be expanded. That would be a plus for the community. Rural density should be placed adjacent to the existing rural communities. And more innovative plans could be incorporated to make this project more compatible with the surrounding rural area. Otherwise, this project just creates another villages type environment or Highway 27 Claremont situation in this part of the county. And we already have the villages expanding out towards Wildwood, and do we really need a third villages? We need diversity in community types, and rural communities are part of that diversity. And again, we should have equal protection under the growth management policies and more respect and recognition for existing rural communities. As the Planning Commission, part of your charge is to represent the people and consider how projects will affect the community. So when you consider this project and the annexation, we ask that you consider our existing community. And considering the adjacent community is a defined policy in the growth management plan. So we're all Lake County residents, whether we're in or out of the city limits, except for the people who are proposing to develop this project. So as you consider your vote, thank you for considering our community. Thank you.
Seal. I went to school with her.
My name is Lucille, Hale, Oldham, and I live at 25320 Pumpkin Center Road, Howey in the Hills. I won't address some of the things that have been spoken to tonight, and I have included a letter in your packet, so I hope that you will take the time to read it all. I am a lifelong, multi-generational resident of the area. My family goes back to the late 1880s in this same Yalaha area. And I can tell you, I'm a teacher, and I'd like to give a history lesson on the agricultural economy that had been in that area. But I believe it has been said that it is certainly this project cutting deep into what is an agricultural area. I'm expressing my objection to the proposed comp plan, the LSCP-21-119, the PUD 21-120, Windmill 271-2 LLC, BLR Windmill Road Commercial LLC, and BLR Windmill Road Residential LLC, along with other rezoning applications that may not been formally submitted, yet are still in the discussion stages. This project is yet another change of existing land use that will forever change the character of our area in Lake County/Leesburg. And while I am respectful of private property rights, it is important that you remember the impact of property rights of existing residents too. This project has direct impact to me as it is contiguous along the western border of my property located on Pumpkin Center Road. Given the fact that growth is the economic driver of Lake County, I realize it's highly unlikely that this and other projects like it will be denied. My hope is that the final approval of this project will include the requirements that will make it a final product, a transitional land use from urban to existing rural residential land use while maintaining the character of this area. This can be accomplished by only allowing less intensive land uses near the rural areas, such as low-density housing. And by the way, those lots that come right up to the back of my property are 50 feet by 120 feet. That's not low density. Parks should be included. I didn't hear that. And a wide buffer consisting of shade trees as well as a wall along the perimeter of the properties adjacent to the rural residential areas. It was also noted tonight that there are considerations given to the impacts of noise, lighting, and traffic, but I do have a huge concern of the traffic on Number 2 Road. It is very important to keep Number 2 Road as it is to maintain the rural character of the area. It's also important to protect the hills and forests by not allowing clear cutting and mass grading. I did hear that that was not going to be done, but we'll see. In closing, I'll just say that much of Lake County is being developed into cookie-cutter residential and commercial uses, and this leads to the total loss of character that makes Lake County unique and diminishes property values. You need only to look to communities which cherish and protect their heritage to see what makes them stand out. It will not stop growth, even though you may hear those threats. It may, however, prevent undesirable growth. Set the bar high, and you will get the kind of growth that will result in long-term benefits to the county and the city.
Thank you. Okay, this one I'm not sure of. Ron France, maybe? The third.
How you doing? Ron Francis III. I live at 725 Calabria Way in Howie in the Hills, but I just bought a piece of property with 40 acres off of Pumpkin Center. Closed on it last week, so nice impact first week I own the property. Change is inevitable. It's gonna happen. Growth is inevitable in this area. I would much rather see a development come in with good quality businesses in there. I heard medical facilities. I hear quite a bit of talking about Number 2 Road, but I did hear that they were putting like $30 million into road improvements. So that's much needed in the area. I look at these back roads, and I'm on 19, 48, and 27 every day, back and forth to work, and I hear road improvements. They need them. That's good. I heard a few people talking and they live in different communities, Highland Lakes, Royal Highlands, Plantation. Well, 20 years ago, when they were talking about developing your neighborhood now, people opposed. So just keep that in mind too. 2.7 houses per acre isn't the norm for, so that's better than the average, I believe. That's about all I have, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, did Christian Hutchcroft come in? Do you want to speak? Yeah, okay.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Christian Hutchcroft. Sorry, we're managing two little ones back there. My wife and I both signed paperwork to talk today. I think probably only one of us needs to speak. My address is 25205 Pumpkin Center Road. I have 15 acres that directly abuts this proposed project. My family and I built a home on this land about a year and a half ago. I have a 2-story house there that overlooks this back acreage. Literally our back view is of this 1,000 acres, give or take. I mean, you obviously can't see all of it, but you can see probably 500 or 600 of it. On any given day, I can sit out on my property and have a cup of coffee, look out, see, you name it. As far as protected animals, you've got sandhill cranes, you've got tortoises, there's an occasional fox. Coyotes aren't protected, I get it, but they're out there. You name it, there's birds, lots of wildlife out there, and it definitely runs freely between our property and the adjacent property. To our west, there's a considerable amount of low-lying wetland that feeds into Pumpkin Center. Right now, the water tables are pretty low, but I have seen in the last few years a considerable amount of water moving through that area. Some of us have fought that as that water has migrated and tried to figure out how to mitigate that. So that's definitely an impact that will need to be addressed more thoroughly. We built our home out there to separate ourselves from the traditional urban community. When I say that, I was raised on 10 acres in Groveland. My wife was raised on 5 acres in Howie in the Hills. We wanted our kids to experience that same thing. The traffic on number 2 road, that's a considerable threat. I pull a dump trailer with a Bobcat in it. If 2 trucks have to pass simultaneously on that road, somebody's in the grass, it's usually me. There's a problem there. There's just not enough room there. Density as far as egressing the road there. There's blind corners. Pumpkin Center turns into a blind corner on number 2. You have to watch which way you're going both directions there. I think there's a lot of unknowns. I see that the school system, it's going to be a big burden currently. That's already been addressed as well. The neighbors, we have many concerns. I don't think that there is enough to support this at this time. We appreciate the consideration for denial. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Did you speak for Keisha too? Keisha, sorry. Okay. And the psych spoke, right? Or did not? Yeah. Okay. Well, that is everybody on the list. I'm going to ask the traffic study and the attorney to come up and hopefully took notes. I did if you didn't, to answer and address these questions and concerns. Please.
Tara Tedrow again for the record. There was a couple different concerns that were noted from the residents, and I certainly appreciate them coming out tonight. You all live in the area. These are your homes next to the development we're proposing. While I don't understand from the vantage point of living there, I can certainly appreciate the concerns you have, and I know your staff has taken those into consideration. I don't know if it means much to you, but certainly the city staff looked at the surrounding areas and the surrounding properties when coming up with really specific design standards for why we have to have significant buffering, for why we need to put in fencing in certain areas, for why we need to have a lot of canopy trees and large vegetative bufferings, for why we need to maintain some of that existing vegetative buffering that's already out there, which is why we're not intending to come clear-cut a property whose value really lies in the natural beauty of that site, which is something we want to offer to people. Just the same way that all of you love living out in this area, our hope is that we give that opportunity to other people who will come and want to live in this area as well, and that we can do this in a very thoughtfully designed, master planned community. Some of the issues that you've talked about in terms of flooding and infrastructure, roadway infrastructure, those things don't get put in by a local government, usually short of a developer coming in to pay to do that. One of the problems I always see with this piecemeal development that happens in a lot of areas is one developer comes in, and I literally have my clients building 30 feet of roadway. to nowhere, or sidewalks to nowhere, because we don't own all the property, so we don't build on other people's properties. But when you have such a large piece of land like this, this is why that intentional and thoughtful design allows for us to have the appropriate type of infrastructure in place that really looks long-term, because you don't want to wait 50 years for number 2 road to be a standard width with safety considerations, a road big enough for 2 cars to drive past each other. That's dangerous from a pedestrian standpoint and from a vehicular traffic standpoint. So those are all the things that we have to design around. The PUD does a very good job of outlining a lot of those considerations. One that got brought up was with regards to stormwater and drainage management. And it says very clearly that all drainage has to be designed and constructed in a manner to meet all state and city codes, including the requirement that all stormwater runoff is contained within the boundaries of the properties, does not create a detriment to surrounding properties, and prior to receiving final development approval, we have to submit a stormwater management plan and utility plan acceptable to the city. Prior to any clearing or disturbance of natural vegetation, we have to provide that detailed site plan, stormwater management plan. We have to give an entity that's responsible for the maintenance of that infrastructure. We have to show the 100-year floodplain, documentation that comes with FEMA map requirements. I mean, there's some very specific requirements that come in place. The reason we don't have detailed lot layout site plans before you tonight is because this is a high-level entitlement phase. Those things all come after this evening, but the PUD is incredibly specific, so you at least have some expectations that if we are to build a type of neighborhood commercial, what is that going to look like? Well, the design standards are required for us. The setbacks are required for us. To go and fully engineer out 1,000 acres, one, just would not make sense, and it would be financially not feasible at a stage like this if we don't even know that we have the zoning in place to be able to go forward with the project. So it's by no means is this an attempt to be evasive or not provide information. I mean, this is a 31-page PUD agreement that sets forth some very specific requirements that we have to adhere to. So tonight just isn't final site plan approval, and that's the only reason that we aren't showing you grading and utility plans, because we haven't laid this all out. We've given you something conceptual so that you can see what we are intending and planning to do with the property. With regards more to stormwater, we still have to have permits obtained from St. Johns River Water Management District. And in a lot of rural areas, most properties, and sometimes especially in ag areas, certain buildings have been built without having to pull permits. There's statutory exemptions for certain agricultural structures that are built. You know, over years, sometimes those permit requirements weren't in place when neighborhoods were developed early on, and stricter requirements exist now that maybe they did then. And so our hope is perhaps it's an upgrade in some of these instances on infrastructure, but certainly we have to meet very strict permitting requirements prior to us being able to move dirt and build anything on this property.
Excuse me, just for a second. Sure. This will have to go before St. John's too, right?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Exactly. All of the permitting agencies are going to have to review our plans. And I know your city staff is certainly very diligent, and we'll be going through all of those plans as well as one of the agencies that takes a look at the site plan stage. When it comes to wetlands and flood zones, all wetlands on the project site shall be identified by a jurisdictional wetland boundary line. The location and extent of each wetland shall be determined by the Department of Environmental Protection, St. Johns River Water Management District, and/or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Each wetland shall be placed on a map, signed and sealed by a surveyor registered in the state of Florida, and has to be submitted as part of our site plan application process. So again, these are verified wetland maps that have to come in. And it also notes in the next subsection that to that extent practical, we have to place them in conservation easements, running in the favor of and enforceable by St. John River Water Management District, requiring that the wetlands be maintained in their natural and unaltered state. Wetlands shall not be included as a part of any platted lot, i.e. a lot we would plat for, say, a single-family home, other than a platted as a common area dedicated to the St. John River Water Management District or another legal entity such as an HOA for ownership and maintenance. Buildings have to be 50 feet from any wetland boundary line. There's a lot of requirements in this PUD. I would encourage for those who might be concerned with some of those very specific and granular details to get a copy of this. And again, if you give me your email email address. I'm happy to take it off the back of the city and send you everything that we have and that's linked from the city's website. But to send you this so you can take a look at some of these provisions and not just have to take my word for it. But land uses also within upland buffers of wetlands are limited to only stormwater facilities permitted by St. John River Water Management District, and any wetland alteration would have to be permitted by them, and mitigation would be required in accordance with St. John and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, whichever is more restrictive. So there's a lot of restrictive requirements in here, including wildlife management plans, environmental assessments, permits from environmental agencies if we are going to have any impacts. So all of that appropriate documentation is going to be required when we get past this phase, if we get past this phase and get to a site plan phase. When it comes to schools, also certainly, again, understand the school capacity concern and that issue. We're happy to dedicate a minimum 5-acre site. I'll call the schools board, see if they want it. If they're willing to take it, we'll dedicate a site to them in addition to a municipal site that we'll dedicate to the city for them to be able to provide desired municipal services as they see fit. So that will be land that the city of Leesburg can decide what they want to do with. And I think some of the other concerns had to do with traffic. So if you took a better list of some of those traffic concerns, and I can get Jodell to come back up and answer those, but really when it comes to traffic, again, the traffic determination, when we look at these long-term build-outs of projects, we account for anticipated growth that's going to happen, that background growth. We account for the growth that we know is already there, the projects that are entitled, the residents that exist, the cars that are already on the road based on traffic counts. And then we have to see what we need to do to pay to impact, or to mitigate the impacts of our development. So there are some significant improvements that will be made to the road transportation networks that, again, we as the developer are responsible for paying for, rather than the city or county or FDOT hoping in the next 10, 20, 30 years that they'll have enough funding to be able to do that themselves. So when you look at the project as a whole, I can certainly understand that there are concerns when any new development comes in, but we believe that we've thoughtfully designed a project that's going to bring in and attract folks who want a lifestyle that has equestrian amenities, that I can drive 3 minutes in a golf cart to go to a bakery or the local pharmacy or to any other neighborhood scale use, which is only ancillary to the primary nature of the project really being residential. And it's going to be an incredible project. I can only imagine, as somebody who lives in Orange County, and really don't have a whole lot out there in terms of somewhere I could say there's 400 acres of opened wetlands inside of one community that are going to have walking paths and biking trails and golf cart paths for people to get from one area to another. We've laid it out in a way that we think really meets all of the policies. And I can tell you your staff does not recommend approval of everything. They've actually told me they would not recommend approval of some things I've asked them before. So I know they don't dole that out easily, but they do it after a careful consideration of the appropriate policies under the comprehensive plan as well as under the land development code. And those are the policies that dictate the decision that we're asking you to make tonight. And it's not that your decision says you like this project and you want to live here, you like the developer, you endorse growth. As a planning commissioner, you're in a tough position because in the face of community opposition, your job is to evaluate projects on those codes and those comprehensive plan policies that are applicable to your determination. So I appreciate that this is a tough consideration for everybody in the room. I'd like to try to give as much of an assurance that if we can give you more information, if there really is feedback that we can try to incorporate, those are things we'll take into consideration. If you just say you hate the project, I'm happy to listen to that too. Probably not very actionable from my standpoint, but if there are things that we could do to try to mitigate concerns that we can implement, like I said, I'll stay afterward. We will take that into consideration, and certainly I know you'll be back at City Council too, so you can hold me to it if I don't follow up with you there. But thank you again for your time this evening. If you have any other specific questions, we have our engineers, our traffic engineers here, and happy to answer those. And we would request a recommendation for approval consistent with your professional staffs.
Excuse me, before you go, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
There are 250 people that want to know about the Yalaha Rural Protection Area, and that was not addressed. And so I think that would put them at ease.
Sure, so that protection area is a Lake County policy that post-annexation, we come under the jurisdiction of the city of Leesburg, but part of that protection area talks about how to have compatibility with rural lifestyles. So again, our design, the amount of open space, the way that we've laid the project out to the greatest extent practical, even though it wouldn't apply to us post-annexation, because we wouldn't be under the jurisdictional limitations of Lake County, but those are being taken into consideration in terms of how we've overall designed the project for compatibility with existing rural in the area, keeping it overall on a gross density basis very low, and trying to incorporate those types of elements into the project itself. Thank you for the reminder on that.
You're welcome.
That was one of mine. The other one is just a comment, I guess. There's, obviously there's a lot of people concerned. Would you be willing to, if it came down to it, after your, if it's approved, after you come up with your site plan and, more detailed plans, would you be willing to do a community meeting to go over that with the folks?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. If we get to an approval stage, certainly we're not going to be able to hide this project, right? There's no way we're going to get it in the darkness of the night to where y'all are never going to know what we're going to do. We're more than happy to do that. And honestly, I prefer that because otherwise the city gets a ton of calls and no one's communicating the right information, and you hear a lot of misinformation sometimes when you're fear from neighbors as to what could be the worst case scenario, which I can certainly appreciate. So more than happy to commit to doing that if we get the entitlements in place, that when we get those granular details, when we fully engineer our plans out, we will workshop it, share it with the community. Again, those are the times that we can really get some more flexibility. Someone says, hey, we want more trees right there. Maybe we can put some more trees or design something some way. But again, that's why I would encourage, if anybody wants to stay after tonight, would be more than happy to take that feedback. I've had a lot of projects modified with some considerations in mind that we've gotten to here, and tonight's a great way because I don't know how everybody got notice, probably some over social media, some mailers drove by, wondered what that posting was on a fence, but this would be a great opportunity if anybody wants to stay after for us to engage and hear some of the very specific concerns, especially if you're a direct neighbor on any of these property lines.
Well, good. That'd be very helpful because, if it does pass, they may have some ideas that got by you guys and might be able to make it everybody
Absolutely.
happy.
I wanted to piggyback off of that too. That I don't live out there, but I know the area well, and I'm from this area as well. And I think most of the residents out there don't want what happened in the past to happen to them in the future. And it is a lifestyle. We understand development, but no one wants to feel like they've been bombarded with houses, cars, people, undesirable entities in anywhere that they live, that's in any place. And we see, because Lake County is the last of the Mohicans as far as being rural in this area, we don't want to end up like some big unplanned area where we're stuck with cookie cutter houses, cookie cutter cars, and I've seen you've tried to do that, but and I know you're just legal counsel, but speaking as far as the developer, this is a small community. It is tight knit, and I can tell you when you said, I bet everybody looked on social media, they talk to each other.
I don't even have social media, so I wouldn't know if that's how you did it.
Yeah, me either. So, but I can tell you just from, and I know people in the room too. So I can just tell you, neighbor went to neighbor, went to neighbor. That's how they got that out there. That is how rural Lake County is. And so the developer understands, yes, you can do what the PUD asked for and things like that, and yes, this team is very diligent in putting that forth, but just knowing you're gonna get more with sugar than vinegar here.
Yeah, understand.
So I just wanted to stick that out there for the community because I believe that is what they're here for. They know they can't necessarily stop it, but they don't want it to be ridiculous. And to the gentleman who made the remark earlier about the project that we didn't approve, Mr. Miller or someone can correct me, we didn't approve that because that was very dense and it didn't have enough foresight for us at the phase of the project. That is why we did it. Am I wrong with, is that correct, Mr. Miller? With it?
That's correct. That was a single-use project, really. It was houses, and that was it. This is a different style of project
Right.
with multiple uses, which changes the game.
Right.
It's very
So,
difficult.
yeah.
But that's true.
So yes, yeah, we don't say yes to everything. We want some foresight, but I know it's not like when you just go into a big city and you go, yeah, we own the property, we did the rules, and then that's it. You're just gonna get more with sugar here, period.
And I appreciate how courteous everybody was in their public comments. It is unusual. Sometimes we walk out of here or run out of here after
Just a good night
meetings.
for you.
Thank you for that at
Maybe
least.
because you were easy on the eyes. It was just a good night for you because it can
only
get
makeup.
rowdy in here.
You still have to get your car.
Good point.
Sorry. Okay, I think that was everything that there was also a question about expansion of the equestrian area. Of course, that could be addressed in the community thing, but I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Mr. Chairman,
It might be beyond your,
within the PUD, the equestrian area has a minimum size. There's no maximum size, so that would not require, if this whole thing went through, that would not require a change within the PUD, if I remember correctly.
what was the minimum, 12 or 13?
I believe it was 10 acres.
10? Okay. No, I try to, whenever a group comes in and does something, I want the neighbors to be happy too. And I figured that was the easiest way to make both sides happy. It's just a kind of a consensus type thing might work out.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that. And with regards to the equestrian facilities, I think Dan had mentioned that's a minimum size. That's for the equestrian facility itself. We're going to have riding trails throughout the community. So it'll certainly be more than 10 acres, but those riding trails are going to be all the way around the community. So it's not just a little 10-acre square and you're going to ride around in a circle on a pony or something. It's meant to truly be an equestrian community and to build in those types of trail networks. The trails are noted specifically in the PUD as an amenity too. Something else, it's not part of this plan, but we have about 300 more acres that are adjacent to part of our property that we're basically going to be entirely open, but they're not included in the City of Leesburg plan, but it's all going to just be basically more amenity open space, but we couldn't put it up here because it's not going to be in the jurisdictional boundaries, but it's supposed to be part of our overall project as well, but it really is just going to be more all open space, and we were just noting that that's probably just going to be more riding areas, more equestrian space in the future, but would be happy, again, I think it would benefit to come back and be able to show you all that in the future if we're fortunate enough to get entitled as to what that's going to look like really at the end of the day.
And I think that was everything I had. Was there anything you wanted to add on the traffic?
Was there anything you wanted me to add on the traffic, or?
Well, someone brought it up again, so I just didn't know if there was.
Just specifically about more traffic being out in the area?
Well, just as traffic study itself, I mean, there seemed to be some doubt about number 2 road, and, you know, I would want the folks here to be a little more confident with what's happening.
Number 2 road falls under the jurisdiction of Lake County, so as part of the process, we would have to get our permits through Lake County and meet their requirements for number 2 road, which they have stated that they are concerned about in terms of the width of the roadway. So we know that in order for us to connect, we are going to have to make improvements to number 2. And whether or not number 2 stays, or if there's another direction we go to, and what they mentioned in terms of Dewey Robbins, that is something that we'll be discussing with Lake County. And in addition to that, like I said, permitting for the roadways will go through Lake County because they own, the jurisdiction is number 2, and other than US 27, which will go through DOT for permitting to connect.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Both of you. if you could, maybe the people that contact you and email back and forth, make a, a group email, whatever you want to call it, where you could shoot information to everybody and maybe update people of things, just kind of a...
Sugar. Yeah, I've done that on a lot of other
yeah.
projects. Happy to do that. More than happy. Again, I will not spam your inboxes with unnecessary stuff or legal advertisements or anything, so it'll be very specific to this project. If you do want to give your email addresses at the end of this, I'll send you again the concept plans. We will send you the copies of the presentation we had tonight, a copy of the PUD. So we'll get you that information, and you can feel free to call or email me if you have other questions, and we'll get you to the right person to answer them if you don't feel like you got enough information tonight or leave and think of something later.
Yeah, I think more the education, the better people feel, so.
And we have about 6 weeks until we go to city council, so more than happy to have a dialogue with folks, and this is a really good opportunity to hear feedback, but also to stay after, and anybody who has questions right now or concerns that you didn't feel comfortable saying tonight or just thought of, again, happy to engage with you.
Did you have to?
Yeah, one more question. Just on the roads again, sorry to be beating up the roads there, but those improvements on all the exterior roads will have to be made prior to construction, correct?
So part of, you do provide a proportionate share, so it's not necessarily like the whole entire, so that $24 million that was quoted, is a proportionate share for those improvements.
Sure.
Though that proportionate share can be channelized into a specific project, so, it's very expensive to build a road. It's, 24 million probably will get you maybe 3 miles of 6-lane roadway on US 27. So there is a possibility of, pushing that money towards a specific project instead of just like holding this money for, number 2 road and then one for US 27 and possibly for County Road 470, and that doesn't get built until someone else contributes to that project. So, yeah, it's not necessarily that they're going to build it, but they will enter into an agreement to provide those funds for that specific project.
Right. I think the concern is the number 2 coming out on 27. I don't think is as much a concern. It did come up a little bit, but getting the construction done on number 2 before
Right.
people started using the road and the equipment and everything.
Yeah, and that's a discussion that we'll continue to have with Lake County because they have, the right-of-way is not there, so it's not like we can go out there today and build a standard 2-lane roadway. There are right-of-way constraints, so we'll be working closely with Lake County to address number 2 road.
So FDOT, Lake Sumter MPO, I think you have to report to, and Lake County, correct on this?
Yes, so the traffic analysis was submitted to both the MPO, FDOT, the city, and the county.
So all 3 will have to approve prior to you guys moving forward, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
They would have to approve and some kind of development agreement in place to prepare, to pay for our proportionate share.
Okay.
And just to piggyback on that, section 25 of the PUD says the development resulting from the proposed zoning change would result in demands on public facilities, things like water, wastewater, roads, drainage, schools, and solid waste. And it says no final development order, site plan, and building permits shall be granted for proposed development until there is a finding that all public facilities and services required for the development have sufficient capacity at or above the adopted level of service to accommodate the impacts of the development, or that improvements necessary to bring facilities up to their adopted level of service will be in place concurrent with the impacts of the development. So your question is addressed in the PUD that we do have to have that timing in place and that they will not issue us building permits or final site plan approvals until those adopted levels of service are actually going to be met.
Thank you, Tara.
Thanks. Any other questions? All right.
And with that, if the school is built, that affects the rural area of recreation
So that's, it's up to, it's hard to tell you on this map. Happy, again, I'll send that out as part of something to show you specifically, but those are really just a couple hundred acres of open space that we have, so we're not planning schools or anything like that. So I can show you, yeah, we can show you more specifically. I'll put that on my list of stuff to send out. Again, it's not part of this project, but it was just something to say, we have a lot more open space than we're even showing here, and that's just to connect. We have nothing else planned in terms of, we haven't submitted applications for anything else at this time to the city of Leesburg, Lake County, anybody else. It's just, that's just more open space that we have, but it's not part of this jurisdictional limit.
Thank you. And thank you, I meant to ask that too, so. All right, we're gonna close this to the public, and the Planning and Zoning Commission can discuss it and make a motion.
Hit it, Trey.
I got a motion for LSCP-21-119.
A second motion.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All right. And the other one? Can't find it.
Motion to approve PUD 21-120 Whispering Hills.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. It's passed. Before we close, I want to thank everybody. This was a great meeting. I mean, everybody was orderly, and I know it's an emotional situation, and I appreciate that. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. If we could, for the people who want to speak with the developer's attorney, why don't we start a line, maybe starting in front of Diane's, and then just wrap around the table and get in line. That way we could just go through it instead of crowding around her. Keep it as organized as possible. May I have a motion to adjourn? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.